Today's webinar is generously sponsored by R&D Altanova and offered in valued partnership with the Arizona Technology Council and the NJ Tech Council, which recently rebranded as Tech United NJ. The Rutgers Business School Signature Leadership Series is a relatively new learning opportunity that brings you lessons of resilience, resourcefulness, responsibility, and reinvention through biweekly conversations with thought leaders and business leaders from across industry spectrums. We're excited to chat with Tom Soderstrom of the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory so he can share glimpses of his everyday real-life challenges as well as his leadership playbook. Here to help us get to know Tom better and facilitate today's discussion is our moderator, Ken Venner. Ken has a 30-plus year career in connecting business and technology with the overall goal of making IT like air. You just don't even think about it. He considers himself blessed to have worked at companies that were truly inspirational to him, such as AT&T Bell Labs, Rockwell, Broadcom, SpaceX, and Peak 6. Ken and his team focused first on making IT just work. Then they moved on to demonstrating how technology could enable streamlining and automation and the enablement of business processes. Finally, they partnered with business peers to transform and scale businesses. And it is my sincere pleasure to introduce and hand things over to Ken Venner. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Margaret. And I'm excited here to be talking today with Tom. Before Tom started at JPL, he worked in private industry for startups, in international arenas, and on government contracts. These included companies such as Telos, a consulting company, Enterworks, his startup, User Technology Associates, a small consulting company to the government, Digital Island / Exodus / Cable and Wireless, and the .com era for those of us old enough to remember where the .com came from, Raytheon, and then moved on to JPL. Tom, I've got a quick question for you. How did you end up in the field of technology and work on technical things? I've heard there's an interesting story behind this.
Well, I think, and thank you for listening. I think all of us in the audience have an interesting story. And one of the things that make the US so interesting is that we all come from different backgrounds. I am an immigrant. I grew up in the big forests of Sweden. Didn't speak English, but I could swim. And that's what I did. So it was time to go into the Army, and a friend came back and said, why don't you go swim at Pasadena? And I said, I have no idea what a Pasadena is, but I know how to swim. That sounds great. Delaying the mandatory military service for you is a good idea. So long story short, I wrote the coach. There was no email in those days. And my times were good enough, so I got accepted to the college and came for 1 year. We won the American Championships that year. So 1 year turned to 2, and the military agreed, and 2 turned to 3, and 3 turned to forever. So you never know where you're going to come. And I love the leadership principles, resilience, resourcefulness, responsible reinventing. Didn't realize that at the time, but that's really what it was about. It was about when your back is against the wall, you have no money, you don't know anybody, you don't speak the language, you figure out how to do it. And I think that's business in a nutshell. So now I'm very happy. I'm now a citizen, I've been for years, and got then interested in a career. So I'm sure everybody in the audience have a similar story of just the interesting thing here that you and I can share, Ken, is it's never a straight path. You don't know exactly what you're going to do. And if you look at our backgrounds, it's either we're very old or we can't keep a job.
Cute. So given that, when did you join JPL and NASA and the space program? And at that time, what attracted you to that particular industry?
So honestly, in the beginning, it was really about trying to find a job. I could wallpaper with all the rejection letters I got because I wasn't a citizen, and I was pre-med and decided I didn't want to go to med school. But I knew how to program. And so in the end, and this is one of those pivotal moments, if you think back on your life, what were the life-changing things? I was desperate. So I walked into a company. I said, will you hire me if I work for free? And they said, okay. So now I started getting a resume. And then one day, a contractor to JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, called and said, "Hey, you're interested in coming here?" I go, "Yeah." So then I got a job there as a programmer and found that space is incredibly interesting. And there's so much that we don't know, and being part of figuring that out is what really rekindled my passion now that I had a paying job.
That's fantastic. Wow, what a great story. So you've been at JPL, you started as a programmer, you've clearly moved into executive level positions, managing teams. How would you describe your leadership style?
So my leadership style is really, and this is a strong recommendation, it's about people. All the technology, I'm a chief technology and innovation officer, and I've been doing technology all my life now. It's about people. It's not about the technology. So it's about being able to see what's coming, finding people who are passionate about it. And if you can marry the passion of those people, whatever they happen to be interested in, with the needs of the business, then you don't have to be a manager. You can be a leader. And that's really a lot more fun to do, honestly. And everybody wins because we're all busy, but we are not too busy to go into the garage and tinker with what our passions are when we get home. So if you can marry that passion with the needs of the business, then everybody wins. So I think in the end, that's the leadership. Mentor the people to move into areas they want to move into. And one key decision point you all have to make at some point is does a personal relationship trump a professional relationship? So, and it does every single time. So caring about each other, and it sounds almost silly, but it really is true. If you care about each other and you help somebody, they will help you when you need it. So that is in personal life, it's also in business. So marry the passions of the person with the passions of the business, and you can lead, not manage.
That is great. In fact, that ties back to one of the interviewing questions I give to candidates when they join my organization. I ask them the question of, I can make any job in the world for you, Tom. Describe to me the job that you would pay me to come to work to go do. You're paying me, I'm not paying you, because it's back to that passionate thing. What would I pay to go do? And if I can create that kind of a job for a person, then all of a sudden, they're not going to work anymore. Someone's stupidly paying them to do the thing they're most passionate about doing.
I completely agree. Very much so. By the way, I want to turn it back to you, Ken.
Sure.
You've had a very, very successful career. What are your leadership principles? What would you?
Wow. I'm going to go similar to what you said. It is about understanding what the business is attempting to accomplish. It is about articulating a story that people can get lined up around about how they can help that business grow. I think, in fact, interestingly enough, in IT, one of the things I've learned is we're all great at driving the projects and the programs, but many of the times the people who are executing don't technically understand the impact of what they're doing, like how powerful a help desk professional can be, or why having that server run all the time connects up to something in the business that all of a sudden you can go, oh, no, now I see that the thing I'm doing actually supports the business doing what the business is trying to do, versus I'm just kind of a hamster on the spinning wheel trying to keep it going. And so getting those things connected, and then as you say, once they're aligned with doing things that they love and see how it's connected to the business, there's not much you need to do besides remove obstacles for them getting their jobs done versus directing what they do on a day-to-day basis.
And it's so much fun to know what the business is doing. I remember I did some consulting work for Callaway Golf once, and I was an IT guy. And I talked to the CFO, and he knew exactly how many club heads he needed to make to be successful. So that led me to say it's a lot more fun to care about the goals of the business. So in IT in particular, that's our fields, you can go to any industry because it's of all they use IT, but it's about what the industry is doing. It's about the business problem.
Right.
And
and then how IT enables that business. Because I take the CFO thing and go, he knows how many club heads he needs to sell in order to be successful. The next level beyond that is what makes a club head sell, and therefore what do we need to be doing to get that number of club heads sold, or what do we need to know about the consumer of club heads, which is what an IT person might come back and go, all right, we know what the goal is. We got to sell X thousands of club heads. Well, what makes people make a decision to want to use that club head or not? And how do we capture that data and feed it back into the design process or the sales strategy or the marketing brand? It's like connecting all of those pieces of data and then driving forward that concept.
And one more piece to that story, since we both seem to like golf, is what's coming next? What is the next club head, the next technology, and how do you test it? How do you make sure it works? And that's kind of my world. That's what I do. And then the interesting thing now is, who do you partner with? You don't have to do it all yourself.
Right.
The speed to market is just much faster than it ever has been. So
Perfect.
Sideways on golf.
Over. An interesting question from the crowd. An interesting one, maybe you and I could take a shot at. How do you identify the individual's passion to relate it to the organization's passion / needs?
Great question. So let me start with a story, and because that will help answer the question. 7 years ago, I talked about the needs of the business and seeing what comes next. 7 years ago seems like an eternity if you're a student, but it really isn't that long. I realized that we were going to be left way behind in technology, way behind, because I'm looking at what's coming next. And I realize it's going to be about Internet of in IT, but enabling the business, Internet of Things, so you can, like Alexa we all use now, so you can interact with it, and about building sensors, putting all the data in the cloud. Now you can understand it through visualization, through analytics, and through machine learning. We didn't have any of those skills, and it was all new. So how do we do that? So I set the long goal of reinventing, of I'm going to bring those skills in. I had no money, I had no skills, I didn't have the interest of the business, but I knew this is going to be the next club head, essentially. So what I did was I brought in interns. And how do I identify the interns? Not necessarily the ones with straight A's, but the ones that were passionate about, we're doing a startup. So we turned JPL in from an 83-year-old enterprise to an 83-year-old startup. And I built a startup space, found space that nobody cared about, the junk space, because it wasn't about the space. It was about an open environment, a startup where people could work. Brought in the interns that were passionate about what we wanted to do, about those technologies, but also passionate about the business or business space. If they weren't unbelievably passionate about space, I would train them and I would lose them in 2 or 3 years. So the passion about business. Then I let those interns, the best I hired, and I formed partnerships with universities to do that. And then I let them bring in interns. We hired the best of them and brought in interns. And then we brought the business, the scientists and engineers, into that collaborative space, the startup space, and saw the energy grow. And so then now I had a bit of a bigger team. So I could say, okay, I'm not going to hire for skill set. I'm going to let you, the team, bring in your team members and interns and hire them. But I will hire for 2 things. I'll hire for, you desperately want to collaborate. You want to be somebody that want to work with other people, because then other people will want to work with you. And the second one was passion about space. So the interview process became the team down selects, hires, essentially, and I do the final selection based on passion for space and passion for collaboration. So then once they get in, I train them on the 2 most important things, speaking and writing. It turns out that's how you get promoted. The skill set in technology gets you hired. You get promoted by communicating and being easy to work with. So that's my point. Ken, right back at you.
Wow, I was gonna. Oh, well, you basically nailed it as I would articulate. It's again, at SpaceX, it was the average age of the company was 26, and it was only so high because there was old farts like me at the company. It's mostly built by college interns who join, who are really good at what they do, really passionate about what they do, and they can connect that passion to the mission of the organization, which is saving humanity by colonizing other planets. It's really nice to be in a mission-driven organization where, like, you can just see I'm part of driving forward that concept. And it's for me, it's always been about hiring not the skill that you have, but the passion you have about getting the skills you need to accomplish the task that's assigned to you, and the willingness to just step outside of your comfort area and drive forward to accomplish something, and be willing to fail, but learn from your failures. And then, as you said, I learned over time communication skills, the ability to convert what you know to things other people can learn from you, or be able to communicate a message associated with what you're trying to do and get people lined up with it, was another critical skill you needed to start teaching people. They don't usually get that one coming in, but it's the one that really differentiates people in the environment that you're working in and what you're trying to drive in a company.
No, I think that's well put. There's one more principle that we use. I like the resilient, resourcefulness, responsible, and reinventing. There's another one you build a team, is diversity. And it is diversity of gender, it's diversity of race, but it's also diversity of age. So JPL has a lot of very senior engineers and scientists. Being able to have a group of different age together has proven many times over that it's much more efficient. And we saw the need to rejuvenate JPL, bring in these new skills. So that helped also. But,
yeah. And an interesting question that came in that somewhat relates to that concept, which is one I've always struggled with in tech-oriented teams. Mohammed asked the question, how can tech-driven companies build emotional intelligence in their teams? EQ is essential for leadership. However, it's seen often tech-driven teams lack it as they're meeting deadlines.
No, it's a great question, Mohammed. I think emotional intelligence is something, we all talk about it. And everybody, if you look at anybody's company's mission statement, by the way, ours is Dare Mighty Things. Dare Mighty Things is a great mission statement because it means we do things that are daring, are big, are scary. And you know, we don't always have the greatest emotional intelligence, but it's something you learn, and it's both being caring about other people, but also inside the company, what matters. So emotional intelligence at JPL might be me saying, Ken, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Because if I don't challenge that, it's going to fail on Mars. So the emotional intelligence isn't just kumbaya, be nice. It's about understanding how do you get the effect that you need. Never rude. You can never be rude, but you want that diversity of thought all the time. And one of the things I'm focusing on now actually is emotional intelligence in robots. And that might sound like a paradox, but it's something that's going to have to happen. When we use our smart speakers, etc., can you have a conversation with them? Or are they dumb as doorknobs, which I think they are today? So there's a lot of research going into building in emotional intelligence in robots, so we can have those intelligent assistants that you can have a conversation with. So think about emotional intelligence differently than you have before. Think about it as the context of the company, or you'll be emotional but not intelligent. Ken, what do you think?
Agreed with you. In fact, as you went to diversity on thought and the willingness to challenge, in fact, that's an expectation in the organizations I've been blessed to work in. The interesting spin to that concept, and I've struggled with this with tech people, is the ability to challenge a thought or a concept while not challenging the person who presented that thought or concept. Yes. And that to me is where the emotional intelligence comes in. It is the ability to go, not everything said is what I agree with, and I want to challenge or question what's going on, but not doing it in a way that makes it feel personal to the person who did it. And in fact, I've said in my work structures, there's this term that I've used, disruptive asshole, which means you're the most brilliant person in the group, but you come across as a know-it-all, say-it-all, can't actually interact with people in a dialogue. And I'm like, I generally coach you for 3 or 4 chances, and then if you can't figure it out, I basically move you out of the organization, because a bad actor in the team brings down the overall performance of the entire team.
It does. By the way, all of my new managers, I make them read a book. I'm a big fan of reading books, because if you're going to go out and do something new, if you can speak the same language, so because once a philosophy teacher once told me, if you're talking with Ken is an intelligent person, but he's in this case very stupid. You're using the wrong words. The words mean something different to him. So make sure you define it. So reading a book is a great idea. One book I recommend for all you who will be future leaders and managers is an old book called The 1 Minute Manager. You'll read it in half an hour, a 1 minute praising, a 1 minute redirect, and it's sharp, it's quick, and it works, and it builds that emotional intelligence. So that it's well worth 30-minute investment.
Cool. Hey, one quick question back to the fact that you were talking about interns. At JPL, are interns paid or not paid?
Absolutely 100% paid.
Yeah.
We don't believe in slave labor.
Right.
We think it's a great thing. We take in about 800 summer interns every year, and they have a great experience. And the idea is that they learn something. And what will happen if you're still in college, you will get interviewed from your grades in your school. You probably get the job based on your internships. People like to talk about what you actually did. So it's a great opportunity to advertise what you do. And so we have a very vibrant intern program. Even now with COVID, we usually take in about 800 interns in summer. It's about 500 this year. And it's all from remote, unfortunately. So it's a degraded experience, but it still looks really good on resume. And they generate amazing work for us, amazing. And then we hire the best.
Cool. Bunch of great questions coming in, but I'm going to flip back to, let's go back to leadership style. And the pandemic has caused us all to rethink how we do what we do. Has the COVID situation caused you to change your style in any way?
No, yes and no. I hate that answer, but it's true. No, in that it's still about caring about people. It's still about connecting, and it's still about performance. I mean, in the end, we're in business to in our case, explore space, find life out there, or if there is life out there, find out where the universe came from, where it's going, and try to redirect an asteroid. And if we're unsuccessful, find the next Earth or 2.0. So that's our business. We're still doing it. How we do work in COVID, one of the one is responsible. So we said, what can we do to give back to the community during COVID? We have a lot of very smart engineers and scientists. So we built a ventilator at JPL that's now being licensed and used worldwide. We built a 3D printable respirator that I led, and it was a very quick startup-y program, and we put it into open source so people could 3D print their own respirators. And then we did a bunch of AI and things like that to search for things. So the leadership style didn't change except in one thing. It used to be that we would say, hey, let's get together face to face. Still do that, but we're on video conferences all day long. So when I meet face to face now, I say, instead of talking together, let's do some walking together. Pick up your cell phone, put your headset on, and let's take a walk and talk. And so everybody gets a break. So you kind of adjust to the times, but we're still hiring, we're still moving forward, and we're still, now instead of having happy hours, we have virtual happy hours. And the startup became the digital trailer, and that's how the happy hour works. It's fun. What about you, Ken? In these COVID weirdo times, has it changed your leadership style?
It's definitely impacted communication styles, because in the COVID times I do a lot of management by walk by. I just basically pop in. I've tended to early in my career, I tended to be in closed wall offices, and later in my career, it became more open office. I wasn't sure I'd like an open office arrangement. I'll never not work in an open office arrangement again, because you get a real sense for what's going on, where the buzz is, and who's interacting with whom. The COVID thing has made us get much more comfortable with conference calls, video calls, chat messages, and trying to interpret what is actually said versus what is meant to be said, because that's something you get when you're hanging directly with a person and you know them well enough. You read their body language and you figure it out. It's harder now in these days where we're more distant and more remote to go, Tom just said X, but what he really meant was Y. Mm-hmm. He just wasn't willing to say why. And when I'm close to you, Tom, I could figure that out. I've had to figure out just watching video how to get that same thing going, and how to keep the message about where we're at and where we're going for the larger collective team happening in a much more distributed, disconnected space that we've got going.
One of the things I've noticed is video conference is incredibly important now, obviously, with Zoom success, etc. But we actually now try to insist on having the cameras on, which is a little controversial, but it means that you can see if somebody is disagreeing, if they're frowning or something, so you can ask the question. Usually before COVID, we had some people online and some people in the room, and the people online were completely ignored. Waste of time. They shouldn't even bother to attend. We have now learned to include everybody, and when we go back to on-site, that's something we're paying attention to. How do we not lose, in a terrible situation, we learned some new skills. How do we not lose that as we go back?
Perfect point. From the crowd, another Mohammed asks a question. Hi, Tom. This is Harris from RD Altanova. His question is related to scale of organization. When it gets larger, there are possibilities of losing or diminishing the inspiration amongst comrades. How do you keep this from happening?
That's a great question. I've done many startups in my past. I've worked for small companies, mid-sized companies, and big companies. And this is the world according to me. This is not scientific research, but there is a small startup. Everybody's passionate. The one who starts it is really in touch with the customer. The company grows bigger. And Ken, I'm going to ask you the same thing because we come from different worlds. About 400 people or so. All of a sudden, it gets difficult to keep in touch with everybody. So you tend to hire in middle management. Another barrier is at about, or leap is at about 1,000 people. And then once it's above 1,000, it's just big. So how do you keep in touch? It's a great question. I don't have the answer, but I did look at this at JPL. We're 6,000 people. And I looked at what is the mission of the company, and you can look at the culture. I looked at the artifacts, the things that are written down, etc. And then I said, I'm going to study this, and I'm going to learn. So I wrote 5 questions, and I did personal interviews with the senior leadership. Then I asked, one of the questions was, who's the most innovative in your mind? Then I did individual interviews with them, and I found, long story short, that they were exactly matched, 1 for 1. It was wonderful. Yet everybody felt at the doing side, felt that it was too much bureaucracy. So what I found was that it was the middle management that wanted to look good in front of their bosses. So they added margin on everything, and it slowed it down. And it was usually related to a policy that came from failing an audit. And so if you could go back and change that policy, so identify, how do you measure it? You can measure unwanted bureaucracy. If you can't measure it, you can't change it. But you can measure unwanted bureaucracy by looking at the wait states. If Ken is my boss, I want to do something, I know what I want to do, I just need a yes or a no. And it takes a month for him to spend that minute. It's a 1-month wait state. So we changed the policy to say, instead of you being yes or no, you're monitoring. I'll move forward and you can change it later. So that made a huge difference. So I think the question about size of company has to be paid attention to. I don't know what the right answer is, but it's a great thing for you all to figure out and let Ken and me know. So Ken, what would you say?
Wow. And luckily, twice in my career, I've been blessed to go through relatively large changes in organizational structures. When I joined Broadcom, it was about 800 employees, and when I exited, it was about 10,000. So as you described, the many different skips that happen as a company gets bigger and bigger. And the same thing at SpaceX. It was about 1,000 employees when I exited there. It was about 7,500 or 8,000 employees. And that the smaller group, more intimate, well-connected, and for me, blessed to work at those 2 companies with really inspirational CEOs, with really great vision as to where they're going with their company and what they're trying to do. And so it just became a cascading and training. And what there was a clear focus in both companies about, as you're bringing new people on, making sure they got indoctrinated into the mission, vision, values of the organization, striving and having those conversations. The other thing I'm going to say, like as you just said, it took a month to get approval to go do something. That would be a culture I personally couldn't even work in. I guess I've been lucky to work in org structures that have said seek forgiveness versus ask for permission. So the goal is, you know what we're trying to do. You're the closest to doing it. You probably know what we need to get done. Go do things, and then ask for forgiveness when you screw it up.
Yeah.
Versus wait for your boss to answer the question about whether you have the right to go do something you need to go do. And go, like, it's just basically management's goal in life should be removing obstacles, not controlling flow.
Completely agree. And part of my leadership principle is exactly that. We need to switch the enterprises from a default no to default yes. And I did. So it used to be that somebody had to justify in writing why they should go ahead and do something, make a change. I flipped it to say you have to justify in writing why you oppose that change.
Right.
And it made a huge difference. And the other thing about leadership, and if you become a manager or leader, is think about curling. Curling, you have somebody going ahead and sweeping and seeing where it's going to go. They sweep away the dust. So that's what a leader needs to do. And then on the other side is go behind them and beg forgiveness when they broke things. And so our goal is that the person who would have gotten in trouble never even knew, because otherwise they'd get frustrated and leave. So I bought a lot of beers. I've got a lot of forgiveness from people who felt that we didn't do well. And then you have the 1 minute redirect with the person. So I really like you said that, Ken. It's about eliminating the obstacles. Amazon has a very good principle. Bezos said, if a decision can be undone, just make it. If it cannot be undone, bring me in. I think that's a good way of looking at it.
That is a great statement. And tied into all of this, a question comes from Carol that is, JPL, NASA, SpaceX were able to meet the deadline, the launch on May 30th successfully in the height of a pandemic. What were some of the biggest issues or problems in doing so during the pandemic? And did the companies take any risks during the coronavirus, which they had to take in order to meet the deadline?
Great question. I have an answer. I'm going to flip it and have you start, Ken.
Oh, wow.
I threw you for a loop then. And you can flip it back if you
know, it's actually hard for me to answer that question because I was out of SpaceX during this time. I mean, I know SpaceX's strategy would be absolutely to take risks while this is going on. That's just how Elon does things to make sure it's happened, but they're all calculated risks. It's not like he's flagrantly risking things, but he would be pushing, and this deadline was clearly a commitment he was focused on hitting and driving through.
From our side, we care about space. We care about those goals that I mentioned. However, we care more about people. So we actually did not take any people risks. And if we missed this deadline, so that was the SpaceX NASA launch, and it was very successful. It was fabulous. I was so happy watching it. I was glued to the TV all day. We have ours coming up July 20th. And so that's Mars 2020, now called Perseverance. It was a worldwide competition, and it was named Perseverance. And it's it's really about resilience. It's one of your goals. Resilience was one of the suggested names, by the way. So July 20th, it's going to launch. Normally at JPL, we're 6,000 people. This is our Super Bowl. This is a big deal. We pared it way down to only 300 people. And it's only the ones in the clean room had to go. They had to go to Cape Kennedy to launch it. They wear all the masks, et cetera, et cetera. So we did not take any people risks, and we're very, very slow about going back on site because if we miss this launch, it'll be terrible. And we don't think we will. It was very calculated, but it'd be much worse to lose a life. So July 20th, keep your.
July 20th, everyone be glued to the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Another question from Mohammed: how do you ensure the core values of your organization align with its activities and culture?
That's a great question. That's why I did that study. Exactly that. is the culture that's stated the culture that's actually lived? And if it isn't, you have a problem. It turned out it was. So how do you do it? You make sure that you reinforce those values. And one of the problems that enterprises have done, grown up over the years, and that startups are fixing, is the values need to be sharp, short, and they need to be memorable. And they are principles, not rules. Because if you follow all the rules that came from the values and you still fail, that could be considered a success. I followed all the rules. Whereas if you have principles and goals, that drives towards success, like dare mighty things. If you dare mighty things, you're going to fail every so often, and it's okay. And on the really risky things, like CubeSats for us, everybody thought that that was a toy. Should not be distracted with toys. We should build big spacecraft. A few of us thought this is the future. We're going to have to experiment our way through. So the director of JPL at the time said, okay, here's what I'll do. I know we always have a failure review board if something fails and it's miserable. I am not going to do that. If this, and this was the Marcos that went to Mars about a year ago, if they fail, I will not hold a failure review board. That's how much I believe in this. And turned out they worked. All the engineers that were senior went, this won't work. Oh, I guess it did. Well, the next phase certainly won't work. Oh, I guess it did. So only by seeing can you believe. So I think that the value here really is to dare mighty things at JPL, and all the rest is secondary. Anyway, that's my opinion. Ken?
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, in the end, as you said, the values are not rules, they're concepts, like first principle, always going from the bottom up.
Yeah, working backwards.
Working backwards, seeking forgiveness versus asking for permission. There's just a core set of, do something rather than talk about it, but at the same time, engage others and try to teach as many. Like there's just some core things. And then as a complete team, and I've always told my organizations, these are I've always put out the core values of the IT group as a combination of the company, and I believe we should operate to these. And if we're not walking the talk, you should call us out for not walking the talk, because either we need to change how we're walking or change how we're talking. And we're not sure which we're going to do, but if we say we do it, we should do what we said and take it that way and make it safe for people to communicate that your behavior isn't aligned with your value judgments.
Exactly. And SpaceX and JPL share, and JPL NASA share very risky missions, very difficult things. And if they fail spectacularly. So part of the culture is to experiment your way towards that by eliminating the problems as early as you can. And so that by the time we land on Mars, it's 140 million miles away on the average. You can't really go up and fix it. Not even Matt Damon can in reality. So you have to experiment away all those other problems. And I think SpaceX has demonstrated that wonderfully, with some spectacular failures, but it didn't stop them. It said that's part of the process. And now we see them landing back on the platform, etc. So I think it's very healthy for our business to have commercial space enter into it. In the end, I care about space. Everybody I've ever hired care about space. And how do we explore it? Can we find life out there? Any which way we can. And commercial space is a great addition to this.
Right. I think the commercial space guys are more willing to take more risk, at least the ones that have gotten into it. And as you said, I really did deeply appreciate the drive that Elon had for taking calculated risks and capturing tons of telemetry, because back to the landing the booster thing, he had it as an R&D project to start, and then he blew up one of those boosters because they loaded the wrong software on it, and decided having a different way of building and testing than his production way was inappropriate. And then what he was really going to do was, the first mission was to launch the payload, but the second mission was to attempt to land the booster. And every time he attempted to land that booster, if he got great telemetry from it, he learned more, put it back into the engineering model, and figured, what am I going to change in the next booster in
Right.
order to have a higher success rate. You don't need many people willing to take that level of risk, but those kinds of people are the people that make transformational changes in the world.
Exactly.
So on that concept, during your time with JPL, Tom, what was the most challenging problem you tackled? How did you solve it, and what did you learn from it?
I think that there's technical problems and there is managerial problems. I think the most challenging one was to reinvent ourselves with these technologies that I mentioned. So I created the Innovation Experience Center with not having people, skills, money, interest, and just tackled it. And it took a lot of the 4 value principles. You had to be resilient because many people would stop. You had to be resourceful, et cetera, et cetera. So that's probably the most long-term challenge. One, in the end, you have to be brave. You have to be willing to bet your career a lot of times to really make a difference. I bet my career in 2012 when we were landing on Mars with what became Curiosity. How do we tell the story to the world? And the answer was that when Curiosity lands, we want the world to see it at the same time. That's a big bet. It's our Super Bowl. It's our Olympics. In fact, it was at the same time as the Olympics. So how many people would log on? We couldn't afford it. We'd been using expensive processes in the past. I said, I think the cloud can do it for us. So I think we can use content distribution from the cloud. Everybody said, why would you possibly take that risk? So I said, we don't know how many people will log in, and the servers will crash, and we will be immensely embarrassed. So I bet on cloud and did something completely new. It had never been done before. And in the end, it worked. I can go into infinite amount of detail. It's very painful. But so here's what happened, right? Everybody is panicking. And we discovered we had ordered, this was Amazon's cloud. We had, in all of the things that you do, you are so tired by that point. You've been working day and night. You make mistakes. So we had ordered a database server that was too small. It would absolutely crash the system. So all the people are panicking. One guy goes into a room and just orders bigger servers. And it's virtual. So there they are, and everything goes perfectly. So it's part of it is never to panic and to have a backup plan all the time. But that was a career defining moment, and it was very successful. So since then, we went all in on cloud, and it's been very good. I think as far as a technical challenge, that was probably the biggest. There have been others. If I go geek in on technology, serverless computing, if you haven't looked at that, is a big deal. And that saved us on the send your name to Mars, that hopefully you all did, so that your name will now be inscribed on a chip that when Perseverance crawls across the Martian surface, your name will be on it. We got 10 times the amount of data at 10 times the speed, and it was 1/10 the cost. And that was serverless computing. I bet my career again, and it worked.
Great answer. One from the crowd, Swasti said, do you feel that technology IT, the technology IT space will change in the commercial spaceflight era? Has it already changed?
Yes and yes. It has already changed, but it's going at breakneck speed. So at the higher level, I think this is really good because I think government can take risks where there is no money to be made. And they explore space, science, find new worlds. Nobody's going to make money out of that. Once there is a business there, we should enable business to do what they do best because they will be more efficient. They will be able to replicate. So you have now all the universities and all of the small startups focusing on CubeSats because they are inexpensive to build, they are quick to build, they are light, so you can launch them. So now all of a sudden there's this launch market coming up. SpaceX is a big one. There's a lot of small ones. So you have science related or technology or communication satellites going up all over the place. Now, you also have the Amazons, the Googles, the Facebooks putting up a whole bunch of satellites to wrap us all in internet. So all of this now leads to ground systems tracking to take down the data. Amazon just released their ground system as a service. I happen to be an advisor on that because it's a great thing for us. We now don't have to own all the antennas. We can just rent space. So it's here, it's changed, but it's changing even more drastically. 5G is going to be an enabler. 6G is going to be amazing. And getting internet access everywhere, how do you do that? These satellites are going to make it happen. So yes and yes. Ken, anything else to share on that one?
You know, honestly, I agree with you 100% there. I mean, I think the rate and pace at which technology is being applied, and as you just said, CubeSats are lower orbit. They turn over more quickly than the really big ones that you put out at GEO. And so you're seeing people be willing to take more aggressive approaches towards the tech they'll even put in the vehicle, because their perception is they can turn that vehicle around and over, which only accelerates the pace at which technology goes. And I think the people who are building these things are looking at, they're more open to cloud-oriented solutions or using AI for inspection and detection and telemetry. And there's just this big wave of IT. And then the point that you just raised that I hadn't even thought about, which was the as a service piece of space. It's like, oh my God, that is, because I know SpaceX had to build all of its own ground station networks. Yeah. And that was not a trivial task to go do. And there's sections where they go dark because they don't have a ground station in the right place or they haven't gotten it up yet. And so this but who the hell uses all these ground stations all the time? So having that infrastructure as a shared infrastructure, basically following the cloud strategy, is one of those things that just enables and empowers more people to get into this market and do more things. And so it starts moving from nation state to commercialization, and you start seeing more services come out that cause more things to accelerate. So yeah, I think it's a really great idea.
And I think you just mentioned as a service. So for everybody who's listening, I highly, highly recommend that you look into the as a service concept. It's more than it sounds like, and I'll give an example. So as a service, so cloud, we took all, phase one was we took all of our servers from our data centers, we moved them into this data center in the sky. So we don't have to own them. We still have to manage them.
Yep.
So we still have to get distracted, like Ken just said, building antennas. You really want to launch spacecraft. So we were distracted. Phase two was serverless computing, computing as a service. So at this point, we just said, okay, I want to solve this problem. Cloud, you figure out how. I want to focus on my problem. Mm-hmm. And it's very freeing. So now we can do what we do best, science and engineering. And the details, the undifferentiated heavy lifting can be done by somebody who's an expert at it. As an example, we're currently experimenting with quantum computing. So quantum computing is out there. Is it real? We only know by trying. And I want to influence the builders of quantum computing to build it in such a way we can use it. So what does that really mean? It means that I can rent space on a quantum computer through my cloud vendor. And so instead of saying, I'm going to write this in quantum computing, I'm going to write this on GPUs, this on CPUs, I just parse the problem up to say, I want to solve this problem as an optimization problem. Quantum can do that. This is an interaction problem. I want CPUs. Very different way of thinking. And it also opens up partnering, unbelievable opportunities, because you can figure out who's good at this particular part of the problem, partner with them, and have it as a service. So partnering is another one that's enabling space. We can ride on the shoulders of giants, not in years, but in minutes. That's a big, big, big difference. So whoever is going into IT, there's never been a better time. You can do things so quickly.
Exactly. And a question just came in from Mohammed, talking about back to, and it ties into both our ability to partner with people and deal with things, but it deals with the concept of failure and how to deal with failure. So you guys talked about how NASA and SpaceX had big failures all along, and it all led to learning and further successes. I believe this is what makes them success stories. But how, as a leader, will you encourage or support the team who personally and emotionally must feel devastated after such failures?
That's a very insightful question, Mohammed. So when we launch something big and scary, there are two speeches written. One is the success speech, one is the failure speech. And it's all, the failure speech is all about motivating the people who just spent 10 years of their lives on this, and that it was worthwhile and it's okay. And we will come again and try it again. Because it is devastating if you put your whole life into something for 10 years, like a Mars mission, and then the next 10 years is going to be analyzing it, and boom, half your career just disappeared. So we spend a lot of time and attention on that, and you have to have parties, whether you failed or succeeded, and they're more important if you failed. So celebrate the attempt, and that's very much in our culture. It's something I'm proud of at JPL. Ken, any additional thoughts on that one? It's a good question.
It's and I'll give a testament to Elon. It is culturally acceptable to have failure. People know that. And what happens on a failure is not a witch hunt. If a witch hunt and a postmortem are the answer, you by behavior show that failure is not acceptable. If what there is an opportunity to dig in and learn from that, and then answer the question of knowing then what we know now, what would we have done differently, and how does the organization learn from that failure, but accept the failure for it is a learning opportunity rather than it is a failure. I'll tell you, the team itself is devastated because they missed something.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
There's no way you can change that except for the fact that you strive forward for the next success on that failure, and you kill the failure by a success following it because you learned the thing you needed to learn. But every booster we blew up, Elon's like, yeah, we're devastated, we blew it up. But look at the telemetry you've got. Here's the changes we're making on the vehicle. The next vehicle, we can only make 50% of the changes on it because we don't have enough time to make them all. So we'll see how much that 50% change impacts what we're doing to see if the other 50% is what we want to do or we want to change directions. So
let me give you a very small example of that, recent example. We had a spacecraft called the Grace Followon. It was measuring gravity. And all of a sudden, the decision came to switch to the backup battery or not, because it was seeing failures. So I said, I was texted by the leader of JPL, can all your new machine learning people help? And I said, sure. So by the time they walked out of that meeting, we were standing there, myself and a couple of machine learning people, understood it and jumped right in. So found out that it took a month to figure out the data because the data was not structured. They had never thought about machine learning. So it took a month to get the data in the right format so we could do the machine learning. And by that time, they had to decide to flip the switch or not. So the team was devastated. They spent a month on it. But we celebrated the success because every mission that comes later is now structuring the data so that they can use machine learning on it. So it'll save a lot of future missions. So the people felt really good in the end.
That is great. And in fact, I've only got one last question I can ask, and I want to thank everyone for all the questions that came in. There's a ton of questions that came in that we don't have time to answer, but I want to wrap this up because we're starting to run out of time. And Tom, there's so much changing now and such a rapid pace. What makes you hopeful?
Good. That's a great question. There are three things that make me hopeful. One is the interest in space, which of course I share. The second one is all the technologies that are coming, cloud, the network, super fast computing that everybody can rent on demand. Then most importantly, the skill set. The people that are coming out are much more skilled than I ever was. And they're able to put things together much faster because they can ride on the shoulders of giants that came before them. So I am hopeful that we can answer the questions of, is there life out there? Where was the universe? Where is it going? And can we find Earth 2.0 in my lifetime by you who are all listening using the new technologies that are coming?
Wow, that was a great answer. Thank you. Hey, Margaret, is it time for you to take over or not?
It is. I hate to break up such a great discussion, and our audience probably actually realized that we were getting to incorporate so many of their questions throughout the discussion that I didn't um, take a chance on interrupting for a formal Q&A, but we did address as many questions as possible, and that was great. So thank you both so much. That was amazing, energetic, and so responsive to our audience. Great audience, very thought-provoking questions. That certainly enhanced the dialogue. I wanted to give another shout out to our sponsor, R&D Altanova, and to our promotional partners, the Arizona Tech Council and Tech United New Jersey. I want to share some information with you about a new program, new element of our signature leadership series called the 1000 Laptop Challenge. And this is a result of our students and their families having experienced financial hardships as a result of COVID-19. Remote learning requires technology such as laptops, obviously, and our corporate sponsors and individual contributors can help. So we'll be sending more information about how our audience members as individuals or from their companies can be part of this important initiative. A friendly reminder to everyone that the RBS Signature Leadership Series takes place bi-weekly on Thursdays at noon Eastern. And we have an exciting schedule of business leaders lined up to sit down with us over the next several months. Hopefully as engaging as today was, for sure. You can always visit our website to learn more. It's business.rutgers.edu/alumni/lifelong-learning. But we also wanted to show you information about our very next one coming up on July 2nd with Camille Gajrawala of Credit Suisse, and we're really looking forward to that. So we just want to make our audience aware that we do a brief survey afterwards. So if you stay on for just another second, you'll see that. Lastly, that we'll be sharing the recording of this webinar via social media and email, and it'll also appear on the Business Insights page of our website. So to our sponsors, our partners, our presenter, our moderator, and our audience, thank you for a great webinar today. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And we're off the air.